Um, you know, our founders really were geniuses. They came up with a system of individual states with rights and with state constitutions. But they also came up with a concept of an overarching federal government and a United States Constitution that would reign supreme. That doesn't mean that states don't have rights. What it means is that those rights exist consistent with the United States Constitution. Why do our institutions work in America? Why does the United States Congress work? Why does the executive branch, the presidency, work? Why does the U.S. Supreme Court work? Because as Americans, we have accepted them as institutions of government, and we've all agreed to abide by what they do. We may not like it, and if you don't like it, in the case of the executive and legislative branch, you can vote folks out. But we've agreed to abide by it. One of the roles of the United States Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution, particularly the Bill of Rights. And what the Bill of Rights does, and what the Supreme Court does in interpreting it, is to set a floor, a minimum list of rights that we all have. And no one can take them away. The Congress can't take them away. The president can't take them away, and the states can't take them away. Now, the states and Congress and the president can affect policy, but it has to be consistent with those basic floor of rights. We have a Bill of Rights, and it's not an a la carte menu. Every right as interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court matters. Some don't like the way the Supreme Court, through the years, through the centuries, has interpreted our rights. But we have always accepted them. Not without dissent, but we've accepted them until recently. And now there seems to be this undercurrent, I see it in judiciary, that if my Democratic colleagues don't agree with the right as interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court, it's okay for them to ignore it. And in this case, their copy of the Bill of Rights goes from Amendment 1 to Amendment 3. They skipped the Second Amendment. But you can't do that. Not and have our institutions, including the institution of the Supreme Court, survive. The Supreme Court has spoken very clearly in Heller and Bruen on the Second Amendment. We have an individual right to own a gun. Doesn't mean that Congress and the presidency and the states can't impose reasonable regulations, but they can't take away that right. Now, some Americans think the Supreme Court got it right. I do. Senator Graham does. Others don't. But we've all got to abide by it. But there's this new attitude in Washington. I've seen it develop since I've been here, that if we don't agree with the Supreme Court interpretation, we can just ignore it or change it. No, you can't. There's this undercurrent. I've seen it develop since I've been here. That cops are a bigger problem than criminals. There's this undercurrent that's developed that says if a cop shoots a criminal, it's always the cop's fault, every time. But if a criminal shoots a cop, it's always the gun's fault, every single time. And what's underpinning this undercurrent? Some of my colleagues believe that only the federal government is entitled to own guns through their police forces. And this is America. You can believe that. But that's not what the Supreme Court has said. And all Lindsey's bill does, our bill, is saying, look, we really shouldn't have to do it.
Right.
It's just say the Bill of Rights matters. The role of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Bill of Rights, and the Supreme Court has interpreted it, and we're all going to abide by it. You know, I've been studying constitutional law. I taught it a little bit at LSU Law School since I was in law school. There have been plenty of opinions by the Supreme Court I've disagreed with, and I know Senator Graham, who's a scholar of the law, feels the same way. But you accept them. That's why our institutions work. And once you start doing what I sense my Democratic friends are going to try to do, is as bad as it is with respect to Americans' right to own guns, it also is going to start undermining the institution of the Supreme Court.